This episode contains mentions of graphic or sensitive material that may be triggering. Listener discretion is advised.
Crime Junkie AF.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show made by the Crime Junkie Ashley Flowers for those who are Crime Junkie AF. And I have the most special treat for you. This month, I have an extra special guest with me today that deserves not one, but 2 episodes. Honestly, like 40 episodes, because I could sit and just pick her brain for weeks. You guys, she has had the coolest job. She's someone who's worked as a death investigator on some of the biggest cases in New York. She is regarded as a renowned expert in medical legal death investigation, spending 23 years at the NYC office of Chief Medical Examiner and as Chief of Staff and Director of their Forensic Sciences Training Program. She's a speaker. She's taught at medical institutions. She is a new author, which we'll talk about. The list goes on, and you might even recognize her from the hit docuseries on Netflix, Homicide New York. Please welcome the legendary Barbara Butcher.
Oh, thank you so much. Gosh, that makes me sound like some kind of, well, it's lovely. Thank you.
You
What a
are
great
some
intro.
kind of something. I am so excited. Barbara, you and I actually just kind of ran into each other at an event. We were at the Hamptons Whodunit, which is like a true crime meets mystery thriller writer in the Hamptons. It was so cool. And I went to your talk about your new book, and I could have listened to you talk forever. And I guess I feel like how crime junkies feel, because I just finished listening to your book, which is narrated by you. So I've had 10 hours of you in my ear. I feel like we're already best friends, but I will make sure we're best friends by the end of this.
Oh, that's terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I would love to dive in, because I know we only have an hour for this segment, and I have so many questions. First, starting off, why had I never heard the term death investigator before you, and why doesn't every agency have one? Go.
Because we're not on television. That's the thing. When you see any of these Law and Order, any FBI, when there's a dead guy at the scene, the police show up, and then a medical examiner shows up.
Yeah.
And they poke around a little bit, and then they leave. That is so unrealistic. Now, when people think about coroners or medical examiners, they think autopsy.
Right.
Because that's a forensic pathologist getting the cause of death. But how do you know the manner of death? How did it come about? And that's why we have scene investigators, medical legal death investigators, some call them coroners. We go to the scene and we find the context of the death. Take a gunshot wound to the head. That's the cause of death, period. But is it a homicide, a suicide, or an accident? Mm-hmm. And how we find out is we go to the scene, we investigate everything, talk to witnesses, work with the police, examine the body at the scene, and then relate it to the scene. You write a report, you take your photos back to the forensic pathologist, who can now do an informed autopsy.
And is that something, though, that every agency has and we don't know? Or, because I did just visit NYPD for the first time, and it is what you imagine in TV, like the rooms that they have, the tech that they have. I mean, they have an operation unlike a lot of places I've been into, like in rural Indiana, for example.
Yeah.
So would it be common that every agency has a death investigator? Or
Sure.
Really?
Every medical examiner or coroner's office in the country should have an investigator to go to the scenes. Now,
that doesn't mean
mind
they
you,
do.
It doesn't mean they do.
Okay.
Sometimes they use the local sheriffs or local police to do a death investigation. But do they have the medical background, the scientific background to do that? Not necessarily. And some use funeral directors. Now tell me how that makes sense. Funeral director is comfortable with dead folks, but are they forensically trained? Sometimes, but not always. So that's why you can get away with murder in this country.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about that? What is your training? What makes a good death investigator?
I was a physician assistant working in surgery, and I was bored to death.
You can say shit. Shit, you're bored to shit.
I was a hospital administrator, all these things. So then, shall I tell you how I got this weird job?
I would love if you told us how you got this weird job.
Okay.
Because honestly, people are lucky I didn't know about it, or they wouldn't have podcasting. I had originally gone to school thinking I was going to be in the medical field. and I hated it, and now I'm here. I could have found a future in this.
Yeah. Definitely. So what happened is, the background is I was a smart, well-educated fuck-up. I was drinking heavily. I was partying all the time. I had good jobs. I lost them. And then I got sober. I said, enough is enough. And thank God for that, because one of the things you get when you get sober is you get help. Mm-hmm. And we had a program in New York State, called EPRA, Employment Program for Recovering Alcoholics. Teach us how to work, how to get good jobs. And they gave me all the tests you can imagine, Minnesota Multiphasic, Myers-Briggs Preferential, blah, blah, to see what I should be. My counselor came and said, all right, Barbara, we got it. You should either be a poultry veterinarian or a coroner.
You're coming up with all these jobs that I had no idea existed.
I know. So I said, poultry? Why poultry? He said, well, when your patients died and it didn't get better, it was very heartbreaking for you. And you're good at diagnostics, but you shouldn't be with puppies or kittens, things that would break your heart. Instead, chickens, they have beady little eyes. Nobody likes them. So, you won't get your heart broken if they die. And it's like, I'll take coroner. So I figured, dead people won't bother me much. Mm-hmm. I forgot, though, they have families.
Yeah, and that's hard.
That's the hard part. So my counselor said, I want you to call the one person in New York City who has the best job in the world. So I called Dr. Charles Hirsch, the chief medical examiner of New York. Very ballsy of me. And I said, can I come in and learn about your work? He said, of course, I'd be pleased. And damned if he wasn't the most amazing, sweet man on earth. He had me in his office and said, tell me about yourself. Made me perfectly at ease. And we talked, and he told me about the work. I said, oh, that's for me. What I didn't know is they had an opening for an investigator. They said, you want the job?
Get out of here. Just like that?
Just like that. And I said, oh, my God, I'm going to fly across this desk and kiss this man because this is so good. I mean, this was a dream come true for me. Yeah. I was the kid that used to dissect animals to see how they died. Everybody would bring me the roadkill, possum with some tire tracks on it, or dead fish.
You were either going to be the serial killer or find them.
Yes, it's a very thin line, as you know, very thin. And so that's what happened. I actually got the job, and they gave me all the training. Going out on every case for 3 months, going to NYPD for homicide schools, special victims, even went to the FBI Academy to learn about serial killers and pattern killers. And I got the best training in the world. Oh, God, I had fun.
Did you feel like you found your place?
Yeah. This was my place in the universe. The little nerdy kid who loved chemistry and biology and cutting things up now had a place. And my dad was a cop, so I already was comfortable with that whole world.
Wow.
Now, mind you, coming into that job in 1992, I was the first woman hired in Manhattan who lasted more than 3 months. There was one woman before me, and she couldn't handle it. I didn't know if it was the guy she worked with ribbing at her or the work. Didn't matter. I was going to do it, and I did. Now, as you know, things are still not equal, but back in 1992, they were even less equal. So one of my first cases on my own, I go to this homicide. Detective comes to the door, says, yeah, honey, how can I help you?
Honey.
Yeah. So I said, hi, I'm Barbara Butcher. I'm from the medical examiner's office. I'm coming here to investigate the body and, do the photos and everything. He said, don't worry about it, honey. Crime scene's got it. I said, no, I have to. I mean, this is
my job.
Yeah,
that I was hired to do.
So he let me in, and I did my work, and I thought, this is some bullshit right here. So the next time it happened, because invariably it will, right? A couple weeks later, again, the detective says, yeah, honey, how can I help you? I said, I tell you what, I don't think you can help me, but maybe I can help you. Because I'm going to go in there, I'm going to investigate that decedent, and I'm going to tell you how that man died, when he died, where he died, and maybe even who did it. And then someday when you're in court telling the jury what you learned, and they're going to say, oh, where'd you learn that from? You're going to say, Barbara Butcher. All right, now get out of my way.
I imagine a nice hair flip as you walk past him.
I hope I was wearing heels that day.
Yeah.
And he just went, whoa, all right. And that was my entree into the world of the police department. Don't take any shit. Own your strengths, own your talent, because I did have major investigative talent, I must say. I was very, very thorough, very into the job. And, so then it all just blossomed. And I just had the best, most interesting, craziest job in the world. And, of course, it was soul-crushing, but that came later.
The soul-crushing came later.
Yeah.
And I actually want to get there, the soul-crushing part, but let's keep it upbeat for a second. For all the shit that you got, and you actually talk about it a lot in your book, What the Dead Know, you make Dr. Hirsch sound like an absolute angel.
Oh, yeah.
I am devastated I'll never get to meet this man.
Yeah.
He sounded like one of the good ones.
Oh, he was the only man I ever really loved. He was the most humble, brilliant, intuitive, kind, courteous gentleman I've ever met in my life. He was my mentor, my father, my brother, everything to me. He taught me not just how to be a good investigator, but he taught me ethics and how to be a person in the world. There was one time a family came to me and said, our brother died in the fire, and I'd like to know if he suffered. And I was like, oh, damn. I said, excuse me just a moment, I'm going to get the records. Went to Dr. Hirsch. I said, well, what should I tell them? He said, the truth. What else were you going to say? I said, well, I thought maybe I'd just kind of make up. He said, no, you don't make up anything. People can handle the truth. They can't handle uncertainty. They can't handle not knowing. But the truth is always much better than what they're imagining. So you tell them the truth in a gentle way because your word is all you have. And if you lie to them even once, the tiniest bit, everything else you say is now suspect. So go do it.
I love that story. And it was actually one that I took notes on. It's in chapter 3, if you're wondering, when you get there. Because I think that actually plays so much into the case we're going to eventually talk about today, this idea that you can't make up a piece, even if it's for the right reasons. Even if you can't make up this piece, and then be like, oh, well, that's a lie, but everything over here that I said, I promise that's the truth. Like, once you lie once, it is over.
It's over.
And he seemed like he was full of all of those kinds of life lessons and ethical lessons. Like I'm literally like highlighting the book over and over, being like, I feel like I'm going to church when I was reading your book a little bit. Every time you got something from Dr. Hirsch, I feel like I did too.
Yeah, he told me just simple things. They call them Hirschisms, and there's even a little book, that they made up of all his sayings. But he told me things like, you can never go wrong if you do the right thing. Ever.
That I believe.
Just do it, and things will be fine. Or if you think of a thing, do it. There's no excuse not to do every single part of your job. None. And he was so damn humble. Every couple of weeks we'd have a new class of cops coming in, medical students, all these people. And Dr. Hirsch would come out in the hall and see a group of them and just say, hi, I'm Charles Hirsch. Would you care to see an autopsy? They'd say, yeah, sure, come on, take us. They'd take them downstairs. They didn't know he was the chief medical
Dr. Hirsch,
examiner. Yeah, because he didn't act like that. He was a humble man. God, I loved him. I got a picture of him on my desk holding some little kittens that we were bottle feeding. He was just the most wonderful person ever.
Do you think, he's obviously one in a million. I feel like I often hear about like the worst of the worst. I've worked with a lot of great people in law enforcement too. By the time the cases make it to us, usually things have gone awry somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you think that he was just one in a million in everyone, or did he stand out so much because of all the other nonsense you saw?
I never thought of that, but that's a really good point. He stood out for his integrity.
Yeah.
Just among all the workers, police, everyone else. But you're absolutely right in that I was seeing the absolute worst of humanity.
Yeah.
The most brutal killers, the most evil of the evil. And set against that backdrop, I was suspicious of everyone except him.
Oh,
and
wow.
I think you're right that he stood out even more in that setting.
Mm.
But no matter where he was the man in the room with all the integrity. So,
did a lot of people last in your role for their whole careers, or was it a role where you saw people getting burnt out quickly?
a lot of burnout, a lot of drinking, gambling, now especially 9/11. People were acting out left and right.
So you were there for 9/11?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. Back then, I remember going to Dr. Hirsch. Now, he was wrong sometimes. I went to him one day and I said, Chief, a lot of the guys are kind of burning out. There's a lot of alcoholism here and, we're having a rough time. I think maybe some counseling would be good. He said, no, Barbara, we're very, very strong people. We can do this, and we do it because we can, and so few can. He was wrong.
Yeah.
We were a mess. Still a damn mess, But
it is interesting, his point, though, because a lot of people, I've even had the question of like, oh, you're talking about this, and granted, I'm not even seeing it, I'm just talking about it, but it's all day, every day, does it get to you? And I said, I think some people are built to do it.
Yeah.
In a way that other people aren't. And this is where I think you are right, like in that even the people who are built to do it, no one's meant to do this forever and not have another side to this or an outlet for it. But I do think that there are certain people who can live in this world and it not affect them in the way that it might other people. Like I've never once had a dream about a case. I could have, you looked at autopsy photos, crime scene photos, and it just doesn't, I'll think about it nonstop. It's living in my brain, but when I close my eyes, it's not there.
You're so lucky. I'm so haunted by images. And, early on, one of the keys to doing that job is detachment, the ability to drop a curtain over your emotions. I remember going into a scene where a whole family was killed. They were looking, the perpetrators were looking for the 17-year-old son who was a drug dealer working for them. Apparently he took something, whatever. So they came to his house. He wasn't there, but his family was. And I guess they said to the father, where's the drugs? He said, I don't know. And they shot him. They asked the mother, and she was, I don't know. Then the 12-year-old son, not even 12, maybe he was more like 9 or 10. Oh. But anyway, I get into the scene, and there's all these people dead, and there's a 3-year-old who's walked through his parents' blood, and there's little tiny footprints of a 3-year-old going through this apartment, his little tiny toes in blood. And I was kind of in shock, but I said, all right, do your job. Just do it. Drop the curtain. And one of the crime scene guys said to me, hey, Barbara, I'm going to get started with the mother. Why don't you go in and do the kid? I said, yeah, sure, Hal, I'll do it. And I go in to see the little boy, and he's in his bedroom, and he's laying face down. He had soft brown curls and golden skin and a gunshot wound in his head and a Star Wars backpack. He was obviously getting ready to go to school, and he was murdered. And my heart stopped. I think it just froze in my chest. I was in shock. I couldn't deal with it. So I went back out in the living room. I saw an officer. I said, excuse me, officer, can you come in here and witness my exam, just in case? He said, just in case of what? I said, well, the evidentiary blah-blahs of the hackolators.
Words, yeah.
Words, yeah. I went back in, and with him there, I was able to have an audience for whom I could act competent, cool, and unaffected. Couldn't do it on my own, but now I had an audience. I was able to do my examination, cut my feelings off. And for that moment, I was okay. Am I okay now? No, damn it, because I can still see those toe prints. I can still see the softness of his curly, soft hair. And I wish I'd never seen that.
You've probably seen a lot.
A real lot. That was...
I mean, and in New York City, of all places, I think is
Sure.
where you're going to see everything.
Yeah, it's the most interesting place to die because there's so many different ways to die in New York.
Oh.
You can go subway surfing.
Oh, my God. Wait, what is subway surfing?
Oh, subway surfing is something that kids do. Teenagers, they'll jump on the back of a subway as it's leaving the station, climb up onto the top of it, and then surf it. They'll
my God.
ride it through the tunnels. What they don't realize is that there are metal bars coming
no.
down. Yeah. They get knocked off, they get beheaded, they get maimed. And then there's elevator surfing. In the projects, you got 4 elevators, right? You prop the door open. When the elevator comes down to you, you jump onto the roof of it through the propped open doors. And you ride the elevator up and down, 20 stories. If you're a pro, you jump from one elevator to the next. And whoever jumps the most times wins.
I feel like there's a scene in Mission Impossible that haunts me where he's like on the elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
absolutely. That's how it is. It's real.
How are these kids bored? They live in like the most interesting city in the world. This is
But they're poor and they have no money and they have no opportunity. They live in the projects. It's either drug dealer or dead. Things are rough
Oh my God.
for minority, poor, disenfranchised people.
What part of the city did you do most of your work in?
Manhattan was my beat. I did the whole city. Most homicides took place up in the northern part, Harlem, Washington Heights, Inwood, and then pockets around Midtown. You could kind of see the flavor of a homicide depending on where you were.
Really?
Oh, sure. If you go to Midtown, where all the office buildings are and all the white-collar jobs, you're going to see the kind of homicide where a guy gets fired, comes in and, shoots 2 people and then shoots himself. Or if you go up to Harlem or Washington Heights, you're going to see the so-called business homicides. It's not personal. It's business. It's drug dealing. And Joey shoots Tony, and then Joey's crew is happy, but Tony's crew is going to get revenge, and they come back and they kill Joey and 2 more for good luck. And it goes on and on and on. So they're just business homicides.
Were you involved for like a long time, or is it really just is most of your work done there at the scene? You make a report and then you have to go to the next one.
On to the next, absolutely. And that makes it even harder because there was no resolution for me, no satisfaction until I went to court.
Okay.
It takes a year and a half to actually get in court with a homicide or any other case for that matter. And so by the time I was called to testify, I didn't know what the hell was going on. But that was fine because all I could testify to with any certainty was what I had seen and what I had interpreted. So I would talk about, the position of the body and how I knew what the mother was doing while her daughter was strangled with the mother's, scarf, or how I knew when someone's throat was cut, where they were standing, the blood spray.
Your book taught me that there's a difference between a cut and a laceration.
Oh, there sure is. Yeah.
I learn something new every day.
Yeah, and most doctors don't even know that. In the emergency room, they say, patient came in with multiple lacerations. I said, really, what's the lacerations from? A knife? No, that's a cut, buddy. A laceration is when you take like a baseball bat, slam it down on the flesh, and the flesh splits open. And that tells you the weapon, that tells you the number of the force and the number of strikes that, they received, the number of blows. You can learn acres and encyclopedias worth of wound patterns just by seeing case after case. I can tell you what somebody was hit with. Was it a crowbar? Was it a machete? Was it a hack machete? I could even tell you what kind of knife sometimes. Wow. Double hilt, single blade, curved, all these things.
Were you in court for most of your cases, or were there any ones that you would go ask about and follow up on, or did you the way you have to detach, did you have to just move on to the next one and not think about it?
I had to move on, but some cases bothered me so much and I just had to know what happened. So I would see the same detectives over and over and I'd say, hey, Rob, what happened with that mope who beat his mother on the 2-3 precinct? He said, oh, yeah, we got him, but, we had to let him go because there's, there was nothing there to link him. This is in the days before DNA was so popular and so in use. And, it's all right. Well, he's out on the street again. Ain't that something? And the cases that went to court, most people plead out.
Yeah.
They plead a deal, they go. Save the taxpayers money and time. The ones I went to were the bigger ones, the more controversial. Things like the Central Park baby-faced butchers. 2 kids, 15 years old, decide to slaughter a man in the park at night in beautiful Central Park, our oasis of peace and serenity in New York. But these 2 brats decided, we need something to do tonight. And no one still knows why they did that.
Oh.
But here's the kicker. They did it on rollerblades.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Can you imagine being such a good rollerblader that you could, as a small guy, as a small girl, hack a man to death, stab him 63, 64 times.
Oh, my God.
And while the big tall man, fights for his life, and you're on rollerblades.
And they never met this man. They just were...
The girl...
Anyone who was walking in the park?
No, the girl had known him from a rehab facility. And, they all sort of hung around the park. She had seen him before, I guess. And that night, when she came to meet her friends to sit and drink Heineken's on a 6-pack, she said, I need to stab a motherfucker tonight. Something like that, something to those effect. And then the little guy, the little 15-year-old Christopher, who liked her, thought maybe she was my girlfriend. He went along with it, And they just did it. And then rollerbladed out of the park, which was interesting for me because as I came up to the scene, I'm on the pathway from 72nd Street that leads into the park. And I see my buddy Hal Sherman, crime scene investigator. He's on his hands and knees. Oh, look, Barbara, look at this blood spatter pattern. We could tell by the way the blood drop falls and then has force, acceleration behind it. It smears like an exclamation point and points to where the person was going. So it has directionality and movement. And we could see this little trail of blood just going right out of the park as they skated home. And we could even tell how quickly they were moving because that affects the shape of the blood drop. So it was just dripping off their knives as they rollerbladed home. Isn't that the damnedest thing you ever heard of?
And did they end up getting convicted?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you know how long they served? 7 years each.
Wow.
Can you imagine a 15-year-old evil, brutal killer serves 7 years? That's amazing, isn't it?
Is that like, and again, when I get into something, I just I can't let go and I keep following it. Did you ever follow what happened to them after they got out?
Sure. Yeah, I've tried because there's something in me that has to know why. Why? Even if it's a seemingly dumb reason, like, oh, I was bored, I was angry, anything, but just give me some reason. This one, I couldn't figure it out.
I think that's why so many people are interested in true crime in general. I think that our brains can't handle the not knowing why. Like everything's got to have some kind of reason and order and place, and when it doesn't make sense, we try to make it make sense.
And I agree with that. And I would think also that the reason so many women like true crime is because we need to know what we're up against.
Yeah.
We need to understand how husbands kill their wives. Why? Why sometimes wives kill their husbands.
What are the red flags?
Right. What do people do? We need to know because we need to protect ourselves. And an educated consumer is your best customer.
When you're on a scene for the first time, is there some kind of formula? Is there certain things that you look for first, or is every single scene a completely different beast?
Yes, they're all different, but here's my method, my procedure. First, take my hands off my ears, put them over my mouth. Learn to listen and not talk so much. Nobody needs my theories right now. I just need to hear everything. Then the most important thing is to stand at the entrance to the scene, no matter what it is, and take in the totality of it. Feel it, smell it, hear it. There's so much that you'll discover. And how a person lives often dictates how they die, right? So if you come into a scene and there are scales and bags of white powder, all these kind of things, and there's a guy in the corner, he's dead, no obvious wounds, but he's dead. Well, now we got a pretty good idea of how he may have died because we've seen his lifestyle. Coming into that scene, you'll learn a lot. You'll see what kind of a person lives there. Here's a good, for instance, which I saw a lot in the early days. You come into the apartment of a single man, and it's very well decorated. There's art on the walls. He's well dressed. It's tasteful, and it's clean. And there's food in the refrigerator. And his face is bashed into hell with a beautiful vase, which is now in shatters on the floor. What does that mean? Gay man, hustler. Gay men, especially older, successful gay men, they'd go out and pick up a guy in a bar. And the hustlers, they'd always say, I'm not gay, I just do this for the money. And they'd charge the guy a couple $100, come home with him. But then I've read about this, that a funny thing happens. They look into the eyes of their victim, of the man they're with, and suddenly they see a reflection of themselves. And their internalized homophobia kicks in and puts them into a rage. So what do they beat in? His face. Why? Because he's looking at them, and that's where they're seeing themselves. So whenever I saw that, I thought, okay, gay man, start combing the bars for the hustlers. Or, when I would come into a room and see a pregnant woman beaten to death, or a mother beaten to death. And in each case, they had something covering their face. With the mother, I remember there was a couch cushion over her face. She was just beaten to hell. With the pregnant woman, there was blood spray, blood spatter everywhere on the walls. But there was a pillow over her face. Was that to smother them? No. They were already dead. The reason was that so their eyes could not look at their son or husband. When a man is in a frenzy and kills his mother, because she wouldn't give him drug money, is what it turned out to be. She finally put her foot down. He beat her to death, but then she's laying on the floor. His rage is now dissipated, and his mother is laying there dead with her eyes open, and she's looking at him.
You can't take it.
He can't take it. He's got to cover her face. So I remember walking into that scene and saying, all right, she got a son? Is he a junkie? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, there's your guy. And that's the feeling you get in a scene. There's no substitute for that, for the careful observation.
Is that something that you can get in pictures years later?
Mm-hmm. I sure can. I see them all.
Yeah?
I see every one of those scenes. My God, I see the color of the lights. I think in the book you might have read about the chapter I call Fuck Entenmann's, our local donut supplier. I can still see the man wrapped up under a Christmas tree, smothered, with his face full of sweat. Smothering is such a nasty death, And I see him under this brilliant, beautiful Christmas tree with the presents and the lights. It was such a happy tree. And there was a tag on his chest that said, Maria, you're next.
Ooh.
A few minutes later, I hear screams in the background. I said to the officer, what the hell's that? He said, that's Maria. Can you imagine the terror? That was one of the worst nights of my life. It was just one case after another. And it was my birthday. So it was really
Happy
bad.
birthday, Barbara.
Thank you. Happy Christmas Eve. Happy birthday. Happy death.
I'm December 19th. I'm a birth miss baby, too.
Oh, there you go. But did you get one present or two?
Just the one.
Of course, yeah. Happy birthday,
It was
Merry
a birthday.
Christmas.
Yeah, it was a birthday present and Christmas wrapping, and no one could ever be bothered to go get the Christmas wrapping.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And did you ever have a party?
No, because nobody could come.
Thank you.
They're all busy. They're all Christmas break. No one's in school.
Yeah.
Everyone's got family stuff. No.
I asked my mom for a party. She said, no, everybody's busy. Nobody will come. To this day, I can't give a party because I think nobody will come.
I think you could throw a badass Christmas Eve birthday party.
I just might.
I'll come.
I just might. Thank you. I hope so. No, but that's how it is.
So when did the job stop giving you life and start taking it from you?
Ooh, good question. Now early on in my training, I was watching the autopsy of an 8-year-old girl who'd been raped and smothered. And the pathologist doing the case, this woman named Jackie Lee, very fine doctor. And I said, my God, how do you do this every single day? How do you take this? I can barely look at this poor child. She said, Barbara, when you leave here every day, I want you to surround yourself with things of beauty, art, music, food, love, dance, everything. It's the counterbalance to the death, despair, and destruction that you see here every day. And I thought, yeah, well, that's some hippie bullshit. I ain't listening to that.
How many years in when you thought it was hippie bullshit?
Well, that was in the beginning. About 4 years later, I realized, oh my God, she's right.
Yeah.
I am living and breathing death all day long. I'm becoming unbearable to my partner. I come home and all I want to do is get out of my body. I want to just hide from myself because I don't want to see what I saw.
And you were still sober during all of that?
Oh, yeah, I stayed sober.
That's
Like
unbelievable.
A miracle, right? And so I finally bought this little country house. I had a dog and 2 cats and trees. And suddenly I realized this is it. This is what I needed, nature, life. But then the crimes after about 10 years, they were piling up. So many tragedies, so many children, women, people just tormented, and so much evil. And Dr. Hirsch called me and he said, Barbara, you're not doing too good. Why don't you take a little vacation?
How did he know you weren't doing good?
Because I wasn't laughing anymore. I like to crack a lot of jokes. I like to laugh, have a good time, but I wasn't laughing. And he saw that. He saw my face was gray. I didn't look happy. So I thought, well, I don't need any damn vacation, but I do need some surgery, so maybe I'll just go out and do that.
I do need surgery.
Yeah, so I'll do surgery now. So I took 6 weeks off, had my surgery, and it was good because my partner at the time had a little boy, 6 years old, who I loved more than life. And just playing with him, having little adventures, it was absolutely life restoring. He gave me so much love and pleasure. So then, it's time to get back to work. I was supposed to come back on September 11th, and I called my boss on a Friday. I said, boss, I can't come in. I don't feel good. I know I'm due back in, but I'm not quite ready. He said, Barbara, you can't do that. I've got the schedule all up. Who am I going to get to cover? You got to come in. I said, I can't do it, David. This is my supervisor.
You were supposed to come back on September 11th?
Yeah. And actually the day before, the 10th.
Oh, my God.
And he said, no, you got to do it. I said, no, I'll tell you what, I'll come in Wednesday. Just give me that long. Consequently, I was not there with my colleagues and friends when the planes hit or when the buildings collapsed on them, when the buildings fell on Dr. Hirsch, who, thank God, was blown by the force of the explosion under a pedestrian bridge with my buddy Diane, another investigator. They were tumbled and blown under there, and the rubble is raining down on them, steel beams, concrete, and they're under there, and they're just waiting to die. Diane said, I just thought, this is my moment of death. And Dr. Hirsch said the same thing. He said, I just thought, oh, well, this is how it ends. I'm going to die now. I wasn't upset, just curious.
I don't think I'd be that cool about it.
No, me either, especially with all their injuries. I would be in terror. But they both said the same thing. It was strangely peaceful. And then they didn't die. The rubble stopped coming down. They were protected by this halfway collapsed pedestrian bridge that covered them from the worst of the rubble. And Diane tried to get up, but her leg was snapped and, terribly broken, poking out of the skin. Dr. Hirsch tried to get up, and his ankle was torn to shreds. He was bleeding. They both had head injuries. And then through the flames, through the smoke, through the dust, came a big fireman. And Diane said he looked like an angel of the Lord. And he came through, and he picked her up, and he carried her out. And someone carried Dr. Hirsch out over the rubble, over piles and hills of burning buildings and people. And they carried them to the Hudson River, threw them on barges to get and they lived. They're damaged.
Did it change the way that they worked after that?
Oh, hell yeah. Diane, she was my good buddy. We had a wonderful time. We laughed a lot. And after that, her leg has never been the same. She's in pain. Mm-hmm. It's 22 years later, and she's still in pain. And Dr. Hirsch, he said, I'm fine.
Well, I guess he counseling, yeah.
I don't need anything. Yeah. But you know what? Every single one of his ribs were broken.
Oh, my God.
And he didn't tell anyone. Breathing must have been agony for him. But he didn't tell anybody. And I didn't find out until he got pneumonia, and I went to the hospital with him. And they said, oh, my God, all your ribs were broken. What happened? Nothing. I'm okay.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Dr. Hirsch.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, come on. And, Diane now works. She always was a person who she'd go overseas and do medical missions to help people, and set up little clinics and work with Doctors Without Borders, things like that. And now she still does that. And she also does more spiritual things, trying to get, I think, away from that horror of death into a peaceful place. And I love her, and I hope that she always finds that peace. So
was there a moment for you, a case for you, or it was just retirement time and you were like, yep, I'm not doing a minute more than I have to?
Nope. I never would have left. Never. Were it not for the politics of New York City. Now, after many years as an investigator and after 9/11, I became director of investigations, then forensic science, then I was even acting director of the DNA lab, and I became chief of staff for the agency and running it for Dr. Hirsch. And I was a Mayor Bloomberg kind of girl. I worked with his people very closely. And then a new mayor come in, Bill de Blasio. I'm going to shut my mouth right now.
Politics.
Now, as is his privilege, he replaced all the top people in the agencies with his friends. Was there any reason to get rid of me? Nope. I wasn't the top, but he did. And there's a whole political story about that. I'll let you read it in the book, but And suddenly, I'm gone. 23 years of incredible experience and knowledge. And I had been overseas. I worked the tsunami in East Asia in 2004. 238,000 people killed. And I had the privilege of going there to try to help. The London underground bombings, the airplane crashes. I knew what I was doing.
And did you go when you were still with the medical examiner's office?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. They sent you?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
The United Nations sent us over to East Asia. We went to Thailand and helped them out. That was a complicated situation. But, the worst thing that happened was when I lost my job, I lost my identity. I had allowed it to become who I was. If I met you somewhere and you said, oh, tell me about yourself, I'd say, well, I'm Barbara Butcher, the chief of staff at the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, blah, blah, blah. I didn't say, oh, well, I'm a grandmother and I have this and I live here and there and I like to sew. No, I don't. But, my identity was the job. When I lost it, I went a little nuts.
What'd you do? What was the nuttiest thing you did?
Go crazy. I really did.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to tell it what happened because it's the end of the book and it's kind of wild. But
okay, I wanted it.
No, it was really bad. It was really bad.
Wow.
But the good news is, where am I today? I'm sitting here with you. We're having a wonderful conversation. We're getting to know each other. We're having a good time. And I'm happy. I have life. I have unlimited opportunities. I have the whole world and my grandchildren, the best thing in the world. And that is just, it's the most incredible luck ever that I came out of it okay and better than okay. I'm having a very good life now.
What made you want to write a book?
COVID.
Go on.
Of
I did that too.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I have it. And I loved it.
Oh,
loved it.
Thank you.
So I eventually, after I got uncrazied, I started a little consulting business, working with families, attorneys, to reinvestigate cases that were either incomplete or the people didn't agree with the findings.
Okay.
And it was a good living, very nice. I worked with some writers, giving them forensic lessons and some script people. And then COVID hit, my business died. And I thought, there's a very good chance I could die in this and I'll never get to tell my stories. I'll never get to tell the stories of the people who I got to know in their deaths. I'll never get to represent what they were in life. And I should do that. I started writing, and I got an agent. I was lucky. And sold it to Simon & Schuster, and the editor took a look at the first draft and said, Barbara, where are you? I said, I'm right here in your office. He said, no, where are you in this book? I see your stories, your mysteries, your cases, but I don't see you. Rewrite it. I said,
That's the hard part.
Oh, shit. I got to be vulnerable?
Yeah,
I got to tell you what happened, how I felt?
I can't imagine the book without you in it.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about.
I'm glad that, I got the right editor.
Yeah.
And, they told me, take the reader into the scene with you. Let them smell what you smell and hear what you hear and feel what you feel. And that was so hard because sometimes I'd cry. I'd write about something I had seen and I'd remember that feeling of just despair coming over me. Like, what is the world if there's so much evil? And I'd cry a little bit and then I'd go back to the keyboard and keep writing. And I think it's a much better book for it because you're there with me, And it was hard, though. It was very hard. And I'm so glad I did it because, in so many ways, it was a release of the past. Here's what happened. Here's how I dealt with it. And onward.
Was it difficult for you? You're such a good storyteller.
Oh,
or did it feel like it really did just flow out of you?
Oh, it just flowed. As far as the stories, yeah, I love telling stories. Always have. And these have been percolating in my head for years. The first case in there about the hanging man, the booby-trapped hanging man. That always struck me as the damnedest thing in the world. That I could be electrocuted by a suicidal man. I'll leave the details to the reader.
Well, it is so fascinating the way that you wove your book because it is your story and you are what takes us from start to finish. But as a crime junkie, you deliver on these individual cases all the way through and the lessons you learned and the takeaways you had. And like I said, I walked away being like, oh, look at me, I'm smarter for this.
I did purposely put in there for true crime fans, I put in about determining time of death, how we really do it. You know, it's an art and a science. And I put in things about how you get fooled by, you know, the artifacts of death.
My favorite parts are when you fucked up.
Yeah.
And you like it. So when you talk about time of death, you tell the story about how you're with this family.
Oh, yeah.
You're with this family, and they ask you, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go do my thing. And you tell them that this man died at a certain time, and they're like, oh my God, he was talking or with this person an hour later. They must have killed him. And you're like, oh shit, I forgot the number one rule. You got to like figure out when they were last spoken to or talked to.
Right. What's the first question? When was he last seen or spoken to alive? And then I can tell you what time he died. But boy, that was a mess up. Yeah, I made lots of mistakes, but I learned from every single one of them. And Dr. Hirsch never bitched me out. He never said, Barbara, why did you do that? He'd say, Barbara, I'm curious, the thinking behind that. Did it work out? No. Okay, so next time, we'll think differently.
Yeah, you tell a good story of when you went to court and messed up, and Dr. Hirsch was being Dr. Hirsch. And you're like, yeah, the beautiful thing about him was that I was already feeling bad enough. Like I was beating myself up. I didn't need to be beat up even more, but he told me what not to do next time. How can I show up better the next time? And I think that is, you know, for all the reasons we've said, he seems amazing and great. It's a sign of a really good mentor and leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So he taught me so much about life and, you know, not beating anybody up for mistakes, making it a learning experience.
So what's the next chapter for you? You know, the book is, you had its last chapter, but what now?
Yeah,
What's life look like?
Television. After doing the Dick Wolf series, Homicide New York, on Netflix, I had a really good time doing that because I got to see the guys again, people I hadn't seen in years. And I got to tell the stories to an audience who could maybe understand. It's such a broad audience with Netflix that maybe they could see a little bit about who we are, what we go through, why we care so much, and why we do what we do. And that was a privilege to me. So the next thing I'm working on with Dick Wolf Productions is a true crime television show. We're not quite sure yet of how that's going to look because every producer's got another idea and they keep weaving them together. It's going to happen, well, God willing. Don't you hate to say it? It's going to happen. And then, God. Yeah, forget it. So if it happens, it'll be wonderful. I'll get to work on cases like cold cases or missing persons, which bothers the hell out of me.
Those are the ones that I can't get out of my head.
I know. Do you realize there's 84,000 active missing persons cases in the FBI right now? And every year we add 6,000. I'm talking long-term missing persons.
That's unbelievable.
10 years without seeing your son and never knowing what happened to him. But you know what? Here's the bitch of it. We can solve them now with whole genome sequencing, DNA, and investigative genetic genealogy. We can find out who these people are. We've got so many advances. What don't we have? Money. Thank you.
Yeah.
But if I get this show, I'm going to show up at each town, each police department with a bag full of money.
Hell yeah.
And we're going to use it to get the right experts on this case.
It's going to be amazing.
And we're going to solve them.
That's going to be.
And then I'm going to call you and say, Ashley, you're never going to believe this case. You've got to do this.
Sign me up. Right? I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Has anyone talked about optioning your book?
Oh, yes. Dick Wolf has the option.
Oh.
Yeah, they were talking about doing a 10-part streaming series, bingeable, on, the book, my life, what happened, the whole thing. So that's still in the works. But, Hollywood is a different kind of animal.
I can't do it. Again, that's why I say, I'm going to stick to podcasting because when I have an idea, I want to be able to make the thing and 3 weeks later put it out to the world and ask people if they like it.
Yeah. No, here you have to, if someone loves something, they have to run it up through 14 layers of management.
Yeah. Who are so disconnected from the people who are actually going to watch it.
Exactly.
I know.
You know, right?
I know.
You've been there.
So the important question, who would you want to play you?
Oh, gosh,
Have you thought about it?
Yeah, I have. But everybody's, it would have to be me back at like, say, 39, 40 years old. And everybody I'd want, like Edie Falco, they're all too old now. You know? So, and I don't know all the young, actors and actresses these days. So, but I do know that Dr. Hirsch should be played by Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's tall. He's handsome in an odd way. And I think he has the right dry humor, the wryness that Dr. Hirsch had.
Perfect.
Dr. Hirsch was a very funny person, but in a very dry way. One day I went into him just hanging out, seeing how he was doing. We're talking. I said, Chief, I'm thinking about getting a little plastic surgery. He said, oh, Barbara, please don't get any better looking.
I love him.
Isn't that the sweetest thing?
Freaking Dr. Hirsch.
Right?
All right, well, so I have picked your brain sufficiently about your career. I am like itching to talk about the case today.
Let's do it.
So if you're in for it, let's jump there.
Let's do it.
Barbara, before we jump in, and I'm sure your book's going to come up in Suzanne's case, but one more time, you want to tell people the name of your book, where they can find it?
Yes, it's called What the Dead Know, Learning About Life as a New York City Death Investigator by Barbara Butcher. And yes, that's my real name.
I know. People think mine's not my real name either.
I know, right?
I love that when you had something in there where you're like, why do they call you Butcher? And you're like, that's just the fucking name.
That's my name. Yeah. And you can get it anywhere books are sold. Bookstores, Barnes & Nobles, Independents, and Amazon.
Yeah, and again, plug for my audio friends. Barbara reads her own audiobook. So if you've loved Barbara's voice and hearing her, again, you get to hang out with her for like 10 hours. It's great. All right, so this isn't the end for Barbara and I. There is another episode, a part 2 to this that you can listen to now. And we're going to dive into the case of Suzanne Morpheus. So please stick around and listen to that next. And don't forget to follow this show and add it to your library. And don't forget to follow Crime Junkie. We'll have brand new episodes the last Friday of every month. But if you can't wait until then, you can head to Crime Junkie Radio on SiriusXM on the app for your 24/7 true crime fix. You can follow me at Ashley Flowers on Instagram and Ashley Flowers Crime Junkie on TikTok. And I'll see you guys in just a minute.
Crime Junkie AF.